Dear friends, welcome to Biblical Narratives. I'm Pastor Steve, and today's episode, it's not just another Bible story. It is your story. We're going to journey with Moses, a man whose greatest encounter didn't happen in a palace, but in a dry wilderness. Besides, a bush that burnt with holy fire. And here's the truth. If God can meet Moses there, he can meet you right where you are. So, take a breath. Settle your heart. Whether you're driving, doing dishes, or just needing a word, let's walk together into holy ground. First, let's talk about a bush that burns, but is not consumed. We're looking at Exodus chapter 3 verses 1 to 6. So here's Moses. He's 80 years old now. A former prince, now a shepherd. On paper, forgotten. But on God's calendar, he's right on time. He's tending sheep near Mount Horeb, also called Sinai, the mountain of God. And suddenly, a bush is on fire, but it is not consumed. Let me ask you, have you ever had a moment when something ordinary, maybe a conversation, maybe a Bible verse, maybe a song, a still small thought, suddenly it feels divine? That's the bush moment right there. God speaks from the fire. Moses, Moses. And what does Moses do? He says, "Here I am." And that's all God needs to start. Then God says, "Take off your sandals, for the place where you're standing is holy ground." Why sandals? Because sandals carry dust, dirt, mud even, the residue of other places. When God shows up, he doesn't want your hustle. He wants your reverence. Let's pause and reflect. What are the sandals you need to remove today? What baggage are you carrying into sacred moments? Let's look at Hebrews chapter 12, verse 29. It says, "Our God is a consuming fire." But notice, the bush wasn't destroyed. God's fire purifies. It doesn't annihilate. So, don't fear the flame. Lean in. Let's now look at the God who sees. We'll be looking at Exodus chapter 3, verses 7 through to 12. Now listen to God's next words. "I have surely seen the oppression of my people. I have heard their cry. I know their sorrows, and I have come down." That is not a distant deity. This is a God who sees, who hears, who feels, and acts as well. Psalms 34 verse 18, it says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted." And in John chapter 14, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And here's where it gets deeper. The one speaking is the angel of the Lord. Not just any angel. The angel speaks as God, receives worship, declares covenant. This is a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus. And this validates the Trinitarian nature of God. Christ isn't introduced in Matthew. He walks through Genesis and burns in Exodus. And it says, "I have come down to deliver them, and I will send you." Wait, God coming down to send someone? Yes, because God's presence often moves through people who've been with him in the fire. Next, we look at When God calls, we object. Exodus chapter 3 verses 11 through to chapter 4 verse 17. Now, here comes the excuses. And man, don't they sound familiar? Firstly, who am I? Exodus 3 verse 11, I'm nobody. And God says, I will be with you in verse 12. Again, who are you? I don't know you well enough. And God says, I am who I am in verse 14. What if they don't listen? Chapter 4 verse 1. I am afraid of rejection. And God gives signs and wonders. And next, number 4, I'm not eloquent. Chapter 4 verse 10. I'm not gifted. And God says, who made your mouth? Number 5, send someone else. Chapter 4 verse 13. I just don't want to. God anger burns, but he sends Aaron. You know, God is not looking for superstars. He's looking for a surrendered people who are done with excuses. 1 Corinthians chapter 1 verse 27 says, God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. Moses was insecure. He was afraid, wounded by failure, and yet God used him to change history. Now let's take a moment to reflect on this. What excuse is holding you back right now? Let's move on to part 4. The cost of compromise. Exodus chapter 4 verses. Now let's move to the cost of compromise. Exodus chapter 4 verses 18 through to 31. Now, this part rarely makes the children's storybooks. And chapter 4 verse 24 says, and the Lord met him and sought to kill him. Wait, what's happening here? Yes, because Moses had failed to circumcise his son, a clear violation of God's covenant with Abraham. Before God can use us to lead others, he demands integrity in our private lives. And here his wife, Moses' wife, Zipporah, intervenes. Blood is shed, judgment is averted. Now let's go to Colossians chapter 2 verses 11 through to 14. It shows that this points to Christ. Our circumcision is of the heart, and our covering is his blood. Are there private compromises in your life, in mine, that could cost yours and my public calling? Let's move on. Part 5. What the fire teaches us. Let me boil this down to 5 deep truths. First, God calls in the wilderness. Your past does not disqualify your purpose. Secondly, God reveals himself in the fire. Holy ground can be right where you are, right where you stand. Third, God sends us before we feel ready. Your weakness is a stage for his strength. Fourth, God holds us accountable. Public ministry begins with private obedience. Number 5, God goes with us. You're never sent alone. So, are you ready to say yes to the fire? You know, Isaiah chapter 6 verse 8 says, this is the response of Isaiah. He says, here I am, send me. But only after he was purified. Thank you for joining me on Biblical Narratives. If this episode spoke to your heart, don't just share it. Please live it. Until next time, keep your sandals off, keep your ears open, and stay close to the flame.